The lights of Korvac Station burned bright against the darkness of space. Ships from 100 different worlds docked at its massive arms, bringing traders, explorers, and those seeking fortune in the outer rim. But beneath the gleaming upper levels, in the belly of the station where honest folk rarely went, something darker thrived. Thekmor pressed his four-fingered hand against the cold metal wall and tried to steady his breathing. The Vorthak alien's purple skin had turned pale with stress, and his usually proud crest lay flat against his skull. Behind the thick barrier, something massive moved in the shadows, and the sound made his blood freeze. "You sure about this, Thekmor?" The voice belonged to Corvin, the fight coordinator. The scarred alien leaned against his desk, counting credits with practiced ease. "Grimjaw has killed 12 challengers in the past month. Nobody even gets close anymore." Thekmor's throat clicked, a nervous habit from his homeworld. "That is exactly why I am here. The betting odds are perfect." Through the reinforced window, he watched his last hope pace back and forth. Grimjaw was beautiful in the way that death was beautiful. 8 feet of pure muscle and rage, covered in black scales that seemed to drink in light. Its claws could slice through steel, and its teeth were designed to tear apart anything that lived. The creature's eyes glowed yellow in the dim light, filled with an intelligence that made it more dangerous than any mindless beast. "The entry fee is 50,000 credits, Corvin said, his voice careful. "That's everything you have left, isn't it?" Thekmor nodded. 6 months ago, he had owned 3 cargo ships and employed 40 workers. His family name was respected across the Vorthak Empire. Now he had nothing but debts and shame. Pirates had destroyed 2 of his ships, and the third had been seized by creditors. His mate refused to see him, and his children no longer carried his name. "If Grimjaw kills everyone who tries to tame him, I collect the death benefits from each challenger," Thekmor explained. "Standard arena rules. 50,000 credits per corpse. And if someone actually tames him?" "Impossible." Thekmor's voice was firm, but his hands shook. "Grimjaw is from Kalos Prime. Nothing from that death world can be tamed. The entire planet exists to create perfect killers." Corvin shrugged and held out his hand. "Your credits, then." Thekmor transferred his last 50,000 credits and felt something die inside him. If this failed, he would have nothing left. His family's honor would be destroyed forever, and he would likely spend the rest of his life in debtor's prison. "The trials start tomorrow," Corvin said, making notes on his tablet. "We've got 8 challengers so far. Should be entertaining." As Thekmor walked through the lower levels of the station, he tried not to think about what he was doing. The underground fighting pits drew the worst kinds of beings from across the galaxy: slavers, pirates, and those who found pleasure in watching others suffer. But they paid well, and their credits were as good as anyone's. The arena itself was carved from an asteroid, its walls lined with viewing boxes for wealthy spectators. The fighting floor was stained with the blood of 1,000 different species, and the air always smelled of death and fear. Creatures from dozens of worlds had died here for the entertainment of others. Thekmor found an empty viewing box and sat down heavily. Below him, maintenance crews were cleaning up from the day's earlier fights. Fresh sand covered the worst of the bloodstains, but nothing could hide the deep gouges in the walls where desperate beings had tried to escape their fate. A server approached, offering drinks and food. Thekmor ordered strong alcohol and tried to forget what his life had become. 2 years ago, he had been giving speeches at trade conferences about ethical business practices. Now he was profiting from death matches in an illegal fighting pit. First time in the deep levels, Thekmor looked up to see another alien settling into the next box. The being was tall and thin, with green skin and too many eyes. A Scathani, if Thekmor remembered correctly. "Yes," Thekmor admitted. "You? Been coming here for years?" "Name's HFY. I run cargo ships through the outer systems." The Scathani poured himself a drink from a bottle that probably cost more than most beings made in a year. "Heard you're the one with the Kalos beast." "Grimjaw, yes. Smart move. Nothing tames those things. I've got money on your creature killing everyone who tries." HFY laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Easy credits. That is the plan. Course, there's always risk in these things. Remember about 10 years back there was this Xanthari warrior who supposedly tamed a shadow cat from the Void Nebula? Turned out he was using illegal neural implants. Cost a lot of people serious money when the truth came out." Thekmor's stomach twisted. "Grimjaw has been scanned. No implants, no drugs, no external control systems. Pure natural aggression. Still, you never know what some species might try. Heard there's even a human signed up for your trials. A human? Thekmore had heard of the strange bipedal species but had never met one. What could a human possibly do against Grimjaw? Probably die quickly and add to your profit margin, Vexhai said with another glass-breaking laugh. Humans are supposed to be tough, but tough doesn't mean stupid. Usually. As the night wore on, more spectators arrived to inspect the competitors and place their bets. Thekmore watched them through the viewing windows, trying to judge his chances. Most were professional beastmasters or warriors with cybernetic enhancements. A few were clearly desperate souls like himself, seeking fortune or death in equal measure. The betting board showed overwhelming odds in favor of no successful taming. Grimjaw's reputation had spread throughout this sector of the galaxy. The creature had been captured as a juvenile on Kalos Prime, and in 12 years of captivity, it had never shown anything resembling submission or cooperation. Every being who tried to approach it ended up dead or severely injured. Thekmore allowed himself a moment of hope. Tomorrow his fortunes would change. The death benefits from 8 or more challengers would solve all his financial problems and restore his family's honor. He would be able to return home with his head held high. In the holding area below, Grimjaw continued its endless pacing. The creature never seemed to sleep, never seemed to rest. It existed in a constant state of barely controlled fury, waiting for the next opportunity to kill something. Tomorrow it would have that chance. Thekmore finished his drink and prepared to return to his quarters. Tomorrow would be the most important day of his life, and he needed to be ready. Everything depended on his savage beast remaining exactly what it was, completely and utterly untamable. The registration hall buzzed with dangerous energy as beings from across the galaxy gathered to sign up for the dominance trials. Warriors with cybernetic arms tested their strength against metal pillars. Beastmasters compared scars and shared stories of their most dangerous conquests. The air smelled of sweat, metal, and barely controlled violence. Kimnari stood quietly in the corner, watching the other challengers with careful eyes. At barely 5 feet tall, she looked like a child among giants. Her black hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore the clean white uniform of a medical officer. The small bag at her side contained veterinary tools, not weapons. Next, called the registration officer, a bored-looking Krillian with too many arms. A massive Throgian stepped forward, his red skin covered in ritual battle scars. Gorth the Bonebreaker, he announced, slamming a warhammer onto the desk hard enough to crack the metal. I have tamed Deathstalkers from the Crimson Wastes and Shadow Bears from the Frozen Rings. The officer barely looked up as he processed the entry. 50,000 credits. Standard death waiver. Move along. Behind Gorth, a group of cybernetically enhanced Zenthari warriors whispered among themselves about neural disruption techniques and pain amplifiers. Their leader, a female with silver implants covering half her face, spoke with the confidence of someone who had never met a problem she could not solve with superior technology. Amateur hour, muttered one of them, loud enough for others to hear. Grimjaw is just another dumb animal. Hit it with enough voltage and it will roll over like any other beast. Nari frowned but said nothing. She had spent weeks studying surveillance footage of Grimjaw, watching how it moved and reacted to different stimuli. The creature was many things, but dumb was not one of them. Kimnari, she said when her turn came. The registration officer looked up for the first time in an hour. His multiple eyes blinked in confusion as he took in her small size and obvious lack of weapons or armor. Human, correct? Yes. Combat experience? I am a veterinarian. A ripple of laughter spread through the waiting challengers. The Throgian's deep voice boomed above the others. A healer thinks she can tame what warriors cannot. The little human must have a death wish. Ma'am, the officer said carefully, are you aware that 12 challengers have died attempting to approach this creature? And those were experienced fighters with advanced equipment. I am aware. The entry fee is 50,000 credits, and it is non-refundable even if you withdraw before your attempt. Nari transferred the credits without hesitation. It was most of her savings from 5 years of working aboard research vessels, but she had made her decision. I will also need you to sign additional waivers, the officer continued. The station accepts no responsibility for death or dismemberment during the trials. Medical facilities will attempt to treat survivors, but given the nature of Grimjaw's attacks, there are usually no survivors to treat. I understand. The laughter grew louder as Nari signed the documents. Several challengers began making jokes about cleaning up human remains. A few started placing side bets on how long she would last in the arena. 30 seconds, said the Zenthari leader. That is being generous. Most humans are supposed to be clever, but this one clearly left her brain on her ship. 10 seconds, countered Gorth. Grimjaw will smell her fear before she even enters the arena. The beast enjoys fear. Makes the meat taste better. Li Dongsu, the station's fight coordinator, emerged from his office to see what was causing the disturbance. When he spotted Nari among the registered challengers, his expression grew concerned. "Miss Kim," he said, approaching her carefully, "I need to speak with you privately." They moved to a quieter corner of the hall away from the mocking laughter and crude comments. "Have you actually seen Grimjaw?" Dongsu asked. "I have studied the footage. Footage does not capture the reality. The creature is 8 feet of pure killing instinct. Its claws can slice through combat armor like paper. Its bite can crush bone and metal equally well. And it is smart enough to use those abilities with tactical precision." Nari nodded. "I know what it is capable of." "Then you must understand that this is suicide. The other challengers have military training, advanced weapons, years of experience with dangerous creatures. What do you have that they do not?" "A different approach." Dongsu rubbed his temples. In 20 years of running fights on Korvac Station, he had seen many kinds of courage and many kinds of stupidity. This felt like the latter. "Listen to me carefully," he said. "Grimjaw was captured on Kalos Prime 12 years ago. That world produces the most dangerous predators in known space. Everything there exists to kill everything else. The creature has never shown even a moment of gentleness or cooperation. It attacks anything that moves and most things that do not. Has anyone tried to understand why it attacks?" The question caught Dongsu off guard. Why? Because it is a predator. Because killing is what it does. But it was not born in captivity. It had a life before this place. Maybe it attacks because it is afraid. Afraid? Dongsu stared at her. "Miss Kim, that creature fears nothing. It is fear. Other beings have nightmares about things like Grimjaw. Every animal fears something," Nari said quietly. "Pain, isolation, loss of control. Maybe it attacks because that is the only way it knows how to protect itself." Across the hall, Park Jihan pushed through the crowd of challengers. The xenobiologist looked worried as he spotted his colleague talking with the coordinator. "Nari," he called, hurrying over. "What are you doing here?" "Registering for the trials." "The trials?" Jihan's face went pale. "Are you insane? We came here to study interspecies cooperation, not to get you killed in some barbaric fighting pit." "This is interspecies cooperation," Nari replied. "Just a different kind than what we originally planned to study. Cooperation requires 2 willing participants. That creature down there does not cooperate with anything. It destroys, and you have not met it yet. Neither have you. Watching surveillance footage is not the same as being in a room with something that wants to tear you apart." Dongsu looked between the 2 humans. "Your friend is correct, Miss Kim. I strongly advise you to withdraw your registration. The station will refund half your entry fee as a gesture of goodwill." "No." Nari's voice was soft but firm. "I have seen how Grimjaw moves when it thinks no one is watching. I have studied its behavioral patterns during feeding times and sleep cycles. Everyone sees a monster, but I see an animal in pain. Pain makes creatures more dangerous, not less," Dongsu warned. "Not if you treat the pain instead of adding to it." The coordinator and the xenobiologist exchanged worried glances. It was clear that the small human woman had made up her mind, and equally clear that nothing they said would change it. "The trials begin tomorrow at noon," Dongsu said finally. "You will go last after the other challengers. Maybe watching them fail will convince you to reconsider." As they walked away, Jihan grabbed Nari's arm. "This is madness. What if you are wrong? What if that thing really is just a mindless killer?" Nari looked back at the other challengers, still laughing and making jokes about her chances. "Then I will learn something important about the universe," she said, "and maybe Grimjaw will too." The arena fell silent as the massive doors groaned open. Spectators pressed against the viewing windows, their breath fogging the reinforced glass. In his private box, Techmore gripped the railing until his knuckles turned white. Everything he owned, everything his family had ever been, rode on what happened in the next few minutes. Grimjaw prowled the arena floor like a living shadow. The creature had already killed 2 challengers that morning. Gorth the Bone Breaker had lasted 15 seconds before those terrible claws opened his throat. The Zenthari warrior with her neural disruptors had managed 30 seconds before Grimjaw crushed her skull between its jaws. The fresh sand on the arena floor was dark with their blood. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced Corvin through the arena speakers, "our final challenger of the day. From the human research vessel Harmony, Kim Nari." Laughter echoed through the viewing boxes. In the betting pools, the odds against Nari had reached astronomical levels. A few spectators had placed small wagers on her success, but only because the potential payout was too tempting to ignore. The entrance door opened, and Nari stepped into the arena. She looked impossibly small against the vast stone walls. Her white medical uniform was clean and pressed. Her only equipment was the worn leather bag she carried over her shoulder. No weapons, no armor, no cybernetic enhancements. Just a tiny human woman walking calmly toward certain death. Grimjaw's massive head swung toward her, yellow eyes fixing on this new target. The creature had been pacing restlessly since the last kill, its body still charged with violent energy. It took a step toward her, then another. Its claws clicked against the stone floor like the ticking of a deadly clock. The crowd held its breath. Betting terminals stopped accepting wagers. Even the serving staff paused in their duties to watch what everyone expected to be the quickest death yet. But Nari did not run. She did not raise her hands in defense or cry out in fear. Instead, she walked to the center of the arena and sat down cross-legged on the blood-stained sand. She opened her medical bag and began removing items with the same calm efficiency she might use in her clinic aboard the research ship. "What is she doing?" whispered someone in the viewing boxes. "She has lost her mind," said another. "Fear has broken her sanity." Grimjaw stopped its advance, confused by this strange behavior. In 12 years of captivity, every being that entered the arena had either attacked or fled. This small creature was doing neither. It simply sat there arranging objects from its bag as if it had all the time in the world. Thekmore leaned forward, his heart's racing. "Move," he whispered urgently. "Run or fight. Do something normal." But Nari continued her preparations. She laid out bandages, antiseptic solutions, and what appeared to be food wrapped in clean cloth. From a small container, she poured water into a metal bowl. Her movements were slow and deliberate, designed to appear non-threatening. Grimjaw circled her at a distance of about 10 feet. Its nostrils flared as it tested the air, trying to understand this puzzling situation. The scent was wrong. Most beings in the arena smelled of fear, anger, or the metallic preparation for violence. This creature smelled of soap, medicine, and something else Grimjaw had not encountered in years. Something that reminded it dimly of a time before cages and crowds and constant pain. Calmness. The beast took another step closer, its massive form casting a shadow over the seated human. Nari looked up at it for the first time since entering the arena. Her dark eyes showed no fear, no aggression, no challenge. She simply observed the creature with the same professional interest she might show examining any patient. "Hello," she said softly in Korean, her voice barely carrying to the closest viewing boxes. "You are very beautiful." Grimjaw's head tilted slightly. The sounds this being made were unlike anything it had heard before. Not the harsh commands of its captors or the screams of previous challengers. These sounds were gentle, almost musical. The creature had forgotten that such sounds could exist. In the viewing boxes, aliens leaned forward trying to understand what they were witnessing. The universal translators could not process Nari's quiet words at such a distance, but they could see the effect on Grimjaw. The creature's aggressive posture had relaxed slightly. Its claws were no longer extended for striking. "She is talking to it," someone whispered in amazement. "Talking to what?" That thing does not understand language. But Park Ji-han, watching from the research team's box, knew better. "Grimjaw understands perfectly," he said quietly. "The question is whether it remembers how to listen." Nari continued speaking in her native tongue, her voice a steady stream of gentle observations and reassurances. She commented on the creature's strength and grace. She told it about the stars outside the station and the worlds she had visited. She spoke as if she were sitting with an old friend rather than facing the most dangerous predator in known space. Slowly, carefully, she unwrapped the food she had brought. It was not raw meat like the arena handlers fed Grimjaw, but something different. Fruits from her homeworld, prepared with care and seasoned with herbs. The scent was rich and complex, nothing like the bland nutrition blocks the creature usually received. Grimjaw's nostrils flared again. When had it last tasted something that was not simply fuel for its body, When had anyone offered it a choice in what it consumed? Nari placed a piece of the fruit on the sand between them and slowly pushed the bowl of water closer to the creature. Then she sat back and continued talking, making no demands, applying no pressure. She simply offered and waited. The arena was so quiet that the recycled air system seemed loud. Hundreds of beings watched in stunned silence as Grimjaw lowered its massive head toward the offering. The creature's yellow eyes never left Nari's face, searching for any sign of deception or trap. Finding none, it carefully picked up the fruit and tasted it. The flavor exploded across Grimjaw's senses like a forgotten memory suddenly restored. Sweet, complex, alive in ways that processed food could never be. For just a moment it remembered what it was like to choose its own meals on its homeworld, to hunt not from hunger or rage but from the simple joy of being alive and free. A sound escaped from the creature's throat, not a roar or growl but something softer, something that might have been pleasure. Dagmore's hands shook as he watched his carefully planned future crumble. The betting displays showed wild fluctuations as spectators tried to process what they were seeing. This was not supposed to happen. Grimjaw was supposed to be untamable. It was supposed to kill anything that approached. Instead, the creature was sitting down. Grimjaw settled onto the arena floor, bringing its massive head closer to Nari's level. It continued to watch her with those intelligent yellow eyes, but the violence had gone out of its posture. For the first time in 12 years of captivity, the creature appeared relaxed. Nari smiled and reached slowly into her bag for another piece of fruit. "Would you like some more?" she asked softly. "There is plenty to share." The crowd erupted into confused murmurs and arguments. "Impossible," they said. "No one could tame a creature from Kalos Prime. There had to be some trick, some hidden technology at work. But those with the clearest view could see the truth. The small human woman was doing something that had never been attempted in the arena's long and bloody history. She was treating Grimjaw not as a monster to be conquered, but as a being worthy of kindness. 3 days had passed since Nari's first encounter with Grimjaw. The entire station talked about nothing else. In the cantinas and shops, beings from dozens of worlds argued about what they had witnessed. Some called it impossible, others whispered about human magic or secret technology. The arena viewing boxes were packed every day now. Wealthy spectators paid enormous sums just to watch Nari sit with the creature that had killed so many others. The betting pools changed hourly as more people began to believe the unthinkable might actually happen. Thekmore paced his small quarters like a caged animal. His purple skin had grown pale from stress and he had not eaten properly in days. The loans he had taken were due soon and the interest was crushing. If Nari succeeded in taming Grimjaw, he would lose everything and still owe more money than he could ever repay. A knock at his door interrupted his worried thoughts. "Come in," he called. HFY entered, carrying a bottle of expensive alcohol. The tall Skathani merchant looked concerned. "You look terrible, my friend. I feel worse than I look. The trials are not going as you planned." Thekmore laughed bitterly. "That is an understatement. The human woman has turned my certain victory into possible defeat. Perhaps we can discuss alternatives," HFY said carefully. "There are ways to ensure that creatures behave as expected during important matches." "What do you mean?" "Stimulants, rage enhancers, substances that would make any creature more aggressive and less likely to form bonds with strangers." Thekmore stared at his visitor. "That would be cheating. If they caught us, we would both face criminal charges. Only if they caught us, and only if you can afford to lose everything you have left." The suggestion hung in the air between them like poison. Thekmore knew it was wrong, but desperation made even wrong choices seem reasonable. Meanwhile, in the research team's quarters, Park Jihan was studying video recordings of Nari's sessions with growing excitement. "Look at this," he called to Dr. Yoon Sora. "Watch how Grimjaw's posture changes between day 1 and day 3. Sora leaned over his shoulder to see the screen. "The creature seems more relaxed. Less ready to attack." "Exactly. And look at this movement pattern. On day 1, Grimjaw circles constantly, never staying still. By day 3, it sits calmly for extended periods. What do you think is causing the change?" "Nari is treating Grimjaw like a patient instead of a prisoner. She is looking for what is wrong and trying to fix it." Down in the arena preparation area, Nari was doing exactly that. She had requested permission to examine Grimjaw more closely, and after much argument, the station administrators had agreed. If the human woman could truly tame the creature, the publicity value would be enormous. Lee Dong-soo watched nervously as Nari approached Grimjaw's holding cell. The massive creature was resting in the corner, but its yellow eyes tracked her every movement. "Are you certain about this?" Dong-soo asked. "The barriers are there for good reasons. I need to get closer to understand what is wrong with him," Nari replied. "The viewing windows do not give me enough detail." "Wrong with him? There is nothing wrong with that beast except that it exists." Nari shook her head. "Everything I have observed suggests Grimjaw is in constant pain. The way he moves, the way he holds his head, the stiffness in his joints. Pain makes any creature more aggressive." The holding cell door opened with a heavy clang. Grimjaw's head came up immediately, but the creature did not charge toward the opening. Instead, it watched Nari with what almost looked like recognition. "Hello again," she said softly, stepping into the cell.
"How are you feeling today?"
Grimjaw made the same low rumbling sound he had produced during their arena sessions. Nari had begun to interpret it as a greeting. The creature remained in its corner, allowing her to approach at her own pace. As she drew closer, Nari could see details that had been hidden by distance and arena lighting. Grimjaw's scales were dull and patchy in places, suggesting poor nutrition or health problems. Several old scars crossed his hide, and some appeared to be infected or improperly healed. "Oh my," she whispered, pulling out her medical scanner. "You really are hurt, are you not?" She activated the device, and its quiet humming filled the cell. Grimjaw's ears flattened at the unfamiliar sound. But when Nari continued speaking in her calm voice, the creature relaxed. The scanner's display showed extensive damage throughout Grimjaw's body. Old fractures that had healed poorly, chronic inflammation in major joints, damaged tissue that caused constant low-level pain. The creature had been living in agony for years. "This explains so much," Nari said, more to herself than to Grimjaw. "You attack because everything hurts. You cannot trust because trust has only brought more pain." She reached into her medical bag and withdrew a tube of pain-relieving gel. The medication was safe for most species and would provide temporary relief from chronic aches. "This might feel strange at first," she warned, squeezing gel onto her fingers. "But it should help." Grimjaw tensed as her hand approached a particularly nasty scar on his shoulder. Every instinct told the creature to strike to defend itself before the pain began. But something about this small being was different. Her touch was gentle, her voice was kind, and she had never caused harm. The cooling gel began to work immediately. For the first time in years, the constant ache in Grimjaw's shoulder faded to nothing. The creature's entire body seemed to sag with relief as muscles finally relaxed. "Better?" Nari asked, applying more gel to other visible injuries. Grimjaw's response shocked both Nari and the watching security officers. The massive predator lowered his head and gently nuzzled her shoulder. The touch was so light it barely disturbed her uniform, yet it came from a creature capable of crushing steel. "He is thanking her," whispered one of the guards. "The beast is actually thanking her." Word of what happened in the holding cell spread quickly through the station. By evening, crowds had gathered outside the arena complex, hoping for a glimpse of the human woman who was accomplishing the impossible. In his quarters, Techmore made his decision. He contacted Vexhai and agreed to the plan. They would drug Grimjaw's food with rage enhancers before the next session. The creature would return to its savage state, and Nari would finally face the reality of what she was dealing with. But as he signed the agreement that would poison an innocent creature, Techmore felt something die inside his heart. He was no longer just a failed businessman trying to save his family's honor. He had become something much worse. The next morning, Nari arrived at the arena early. She had spent the night researching Grimjaw's species and learning about their natural behaviors on Kylos Prime. The creatures were pack hunters on their homeworld, social animals that formed complex family groups. Grimjaw had been alone for 12 years. "No wonder you are so sad," she said as she entered his cell. "You were never meant to live without others of your kind." But something was wrong. Grimjaw was pacing frantically, his movements jerky and aggressive. His eyes were wide with artificial fury, and foam dripped from his jaws. The creature that had gently nuzzled her the day before was gone, replaced by a raging monster. "What did they do to you?" Nari asked, horror creeping into her voice. Grimjaw spun toward her, his claws extended and ready to kill. The drugs in his system had stripped away all the progress they had made together. He saw only an enemy to be destroyed, but deep inside the chemical rage, something fought to remember. A gentle touch, a kind voice, the first relief from pain he had known in years. The battle between artificial fury and genuine connection was about to determine both their fates. The arena had never been so quiet. Even the air recycling system seemed to whisper as hundreds of beings held their breath. Nari stood motionless in the center of the fighting floor while Grimjaw circled her with unnatural rage. The creature's eyes burned with chemical fury and foam dripped from its jaws onto the sand. "What have they done to you?" Nari whispered again, her heart breaking as she watched the gentle giant she had come to know disappear behind a wall of artificial aggression. In the viewing boxes, spectators leaned forward with excitement. This was what they had paid to see. The savage beast they remembered, not the calm creature that had been sitting peacefully with the human woman for days. Thecamore watched from his private box, his stomach twisting with guilt and desperate hope. The rage enhancers were working exactly as Vexai had promised. Grimjaw was once again the perfect killer, and Nari would finally understand that some creatures could never be tamed. But deep inside the chemical storm raging through Grimjaw's mind, something fought to remember. A gentle touch on infected wounds, cool water offered freely, the first kind words spoken in 12 years of captivity. These memories were small and fragile against the artificial fury, but they refused to die completely. Grimjaw lunged forward, claws extended to strike. Any normal being would have been dead in seconds, but Nari did not run or raise her hands in defense. Instead, she did something that surprised everyone, including herself. She began to sing. The melody was simple, a lullaby her mother had sung when Nari was small and frightened. The words were in Korean, soft and soothing, carrying across the silent arena like a prayer. Her voice was not trained or perfect, but it held something more important than technical skill. It held love. Grimjaw's claws stopped inches from Nari's throat. The creature's massive head tilted, confusion breaking through the chemical rage. Somewhere in the depths of its drugged mind, the music stirred memories of its homeworld. Pack songs sung under alien stars, the voices of family members calling across vast hunting grounds. "I know you are still in there," Nari said softly, continuing to sing between words. "The real you, the one who was gentle yesterday." The crowd began to murmur in confusion. Why was the beast not attacking? The drug should have made it unstoppable, driven by pure instinct to destroy anything in its path. Lee Dongsu gripped the railing of his observation post. In 20 years of managing arena fights, he had never seen anything like this. A creature enhanced with military-grade rage stimulants, standing perfectly still while its target sang to it. "Impossible," he breathed. Those chemicals should override any learned behavior, but Park Ji-han understood what others could not. "The bond is stronger than the drugs," he said, his voice filled with awe. "Nari has not just tamed Grimjaw. She has formed an emotional connection that goes deeper than chemical influence." In the arena, Grimjaw was fighting a war within its own mind. The artificial rage demanded blood and violence, but something else, something real and precious, whispered about kindness and healing. The creature's massive body trembled as two different natures battled for control. Nari took a slow step forward, still singing softly. "You remember me," she said. "You remember how the pain went away. You remember what it felt like to be touched with gentleness." Grimjaw's yellow eyes flickered between fury and recognition. The drugs were powerful, designed to turn any creature into a mindless weapon. But they had not accounted for something the galaxy's warriors had never encountered before, the healing power of unconditional compassion. "Fight it," Nari whispered, reaching slowly toward the creature's scarred snout. "You are stronger than they think. Stronger than the chemicals. You choose who you want to be." Her fingers made contact with Grimjaw's scales, and the effect was immediate. The creature's entire body shuddered as if an electric current had passed through it. For a moment, the artificial rage flickered and dimmed like a dying flame. In that moment of clarity, Grimjaw saw Nari as she truly was. Not an enemy to be destroyed, but the first friend it had known in 12 years. The being who had taken away its pain and spoken to it with kindness. The small human who had seen past the monster everyone else expected it to be. The creature made a sound unlike anything heard in the arena before. Not a roar of rage or challenge, but something softer. A whimper of confusion and pain that came from deep in its heart rather than its throat. "I know," Nari said gently, both hands now resting on Grimjaw's massive head. "It hurts to fight yourself, but you are winning. The real you is winning." The crowd watched in stunned silence as the most dangerous predator in known space slowly sank to its knees. Grimjaw's head lowered until it rested against Nari's chest, seeking comfort like a child afraid of the dark. Thekmor felt the world spinning around him. This was not supposed to happen. The rage enhancers were military grade, tested on dozens of species. They had never failed before. Yet somehow, impossibly, this tiny human woman had broken through their effects through nothing more than patience and love. The drugs are wearing off, Vex High said, appearing beside Thekmor's chair. We can give it another dose if needed. No. The word came out as a croak. No more drugs, but your investment, your family's honor. Thekmor looked at the scene below, where Nari was gently stroking Grimjaw's head while the creature trembled with the effort of fighting off artificial rage. Some things are more important than money, he said quietly. In the arena, the battle was finally over. The chemical fury faded from Grimjaw's system, leaving behind the gentle giant that Nari had discovered beneath years of pain and isolation. The creature's breathing slowly returned to normal as the artificial aggression released its hold. There you are, Nari whispered, smiling through her tears. I knew you were still there. Grimjaw lifted its massive head and looked into her eyes. What passed between them in that moment was beyond words or understanding. It was recognition of a bond that transcended species, language, and the vast emptiness of space between worlds. The Edos creature that had been bred for killing had learned to love, and the small human who had risked everything to reach it had proven that some connections are stronger than chemistry, stronger than conditioning, stronger than fear itself. The crowd erupted into confused arguments and wild speculation. Betting terminals crashed as odds shifted wildly. Security officers called for backup, unsure whether they were witnessing a miracle or a disaster. But in the center of the arena, two beings from different worlds sat together in perfect peace. Nari continued to sing softly while Grimjaw rested its head in her lap, both of them surrounded by the chaos they had created simply by choosing to trust each other. The galaxy would never be quite the same. 7 days had passed since the failed attempt to drug Grimjaw. The arena complex buzzed with activity as beings from across the galaxy arrived to witness what many called the most important event in modern interspecies relations. Representatives from major governments, scientific institutions, and news networks filled every available space on Korvax Station. The formal dominance trials were about to begin. After a week of preliminary sessions, Nari would face the official test that would determine whether Grimjaw could truly be considered tamed. The rules were ancient and absolute. The challenger must demonstrate complete control over the beast through a series of increasingly difficult tasks designed to prove total mastery. Nari sat quietly in the preparation chamber, reviewing the trial requirements one final time. Park Jihan paced nervously beside her, clutching his recording equipment. Are you certain about this? He asked for the 10th time that morning. The final task requires Grimjaw to show controlled aggression on command. What if the chemical enhancement damaged his ability to trust you? He will be fine, Nari said calmly, though her hands shook slightly as she packed her medical bag. We have worked together every day. He understands what is needed. Dr. Yoon Sora entered the chamber carrying a data tablet. The betting pools are unlike anything in station history, she reported. Over 200 million credits have been wagered. Half the galaxy seems to have an opinion about what will happen today. And what do they think will happen? Most believe you will succeed with the early tasks but fail when aggression is required. Grimjaw has become too gentle, they say, too domesticated to show the controlled violence that proves true dominance. Nari nodded. She had expected this concern. For a week, spectators had watched Grimjaw behave like an oversized pet, seeking affection and responding to her voice with obvious pleasure. Many wondered if the creature retained any of its natural predatory instincts. In his private viewing box, Thekmor sat with his head in his hands. The loans he had taken were due today, and he had no way to pay them. Win or lose, this trial would be his last as a free being. Tomorrow he would face debtor's prison or worse. But strangely, he found himself hoping Nari would succeed. Over the past week, he had watched her work with Grimjaw and seen something he had never expected. The creature was not just tamed, but happy. For the first time in 12 years of captivity, Grimjaw showed joy in simple pleasures like fresh food, clean water, and gentle companionship. Places everyone, announced Corvin through the arena speakers. The final dominance trial will now begin. The arena doors opened and Nari walked onto the fighting floor to thunderous applause. She had become something of a celebrity throughout the station, the small human who had achieved the impossible. Children of various species pressed against viewing windows, hoping to catch a glimpse of their new hero. Grimjaw was already waiting in the arena center. The massive creature had grown sleek and healthy under Nari's care. Its scales now gleamed with proper nutrition, and its movements showed none of the stiffness that had marked years of untreated pain. Most remarkably, its yellow eyes no longer burned with constant rage. They showed intelligence, curiosity, and unmistakable affection for the small human approaching. "Hello, my friend," Nari said softly, as she reached Grimjaw's side. "Are you ready?" The creature made its familiar rumbling sound of greeting and gently nuzzled her shoulder. The crowd gasped at the display of tenderness from what had once been the most feared predator in known space. Li Dongsu activated the trial control system. "First task," he announced. "Navigation of the obstacle course." Mechanical barriers rose from the arena floor, creating a complex maze filled with spinning blades, pressure plates, and narrow passages designed to challenge even the most agile creatures. Many previous challengers had died attempting this task alone. Nari studied the course for a moment, then began walking toward the entrance. She did not command Grimjaw to follow or give any obvious signals. She simply moved with confidence, trusting that he would understand what was needed. Grimjaw fell into step beside her, matching her pace perfectly. When they reached obstacles too small for his massive frame, he waited patiently while she found alternative routes. When spinning blades blocked their path, he used his strength to disable the mechanisms while she guided him away from the pressure plates that would trigger additional hazards. They moved through the course like partners, who had worked together for years rather than days. No harsh commands, no forced obedience. Just two beings cooperating to solve problems together. "Remarkable," whispered Cho Minsu from the security observation deck. "They are not following a master-servant dynamic. They are functioning as equals." The second task involved resisting temptation. Live prey animals were released into the arena, while Grimjaw was required to ignore his predatory instincts. This test had ended many previous attempts, as few creatures could overcome millions of years of evolutionary programming. Small rodent-like creatures scurried across the arena floor, their movements triggering every hunting instinct Grimjaw possessed. The creature's nostrils flared as he tracked their scent, and his muscles tensed in preparation for a killing strike. But when Nari placed her hand gently on his flank and shook her head, Grimjaw relaxed immediately. He watched the prey animals with obvious interest but made no move to chase them. The crowd fell silent as they witnessed a perfect predator choosing restraint over instinct. "Third task," Dongsu announced, his voice tight with disbelief. "Physical restraint without resistance." This was the test that had driven Grimjaw into murderous fury countless times before. Thick metal cables descended from the arena ceiling, designed to bind the creature's limbs and render it helpless. Every survival instinct would scream against allowing such vulnerability. Nari looked up at Grimjaw's massive head. "I know this is frightening," she said softly, "but I promise you will not be hurt. Trust me." Grimjaw's yellow eyes searched her face for any sign of deception or threat. Finding none, the creature slowly lowered itself to the arena floor and extended its limbs to accept the restraints. The crowd erupted in amazed shouts as the cables locked into place around Grimjaw's legs and torso. The same creature that had killed guards rather than accept chains now lay quietly, while metal restraints held it completely immobile. "Impossible," breathed a Vorthak diplomat in one of the premium viewing boxes. "No creature from Kalos Prime has ever accepted restraint willingly." But the most difficult test was yet to come. The fourth and final task would determine whether Grimjaw truly retained its capacity for controlled violence, or if Nari's gentleness had made it completely passive. "Final task," Dongsu announced, his voice barely audible above the crowd noise. "Demonstration of controlled aggression, followed by immediate cessation on command." Target dummies rose from the arena floor, designed to withstand tremendous force. Grimjaw would need to attack them with full predatory fury, proving that its gentle behavior was a choice rather than an inability to be dangerous. Then, at the peak of its aggression, it would need to stop instantly when Nari commanded it. The restraints released with a metallic clang. Grimjaw rose to its full 8-foot height, muscles rippling with barely contained power. For a moment, the old predator was visible in its stance and bearing. "Show them who you really are," Nari said quietly. "Then show them who you choose to be." Grimjaw's roar shook the arena as it launched itself at the target dummies with devastating force. Claws tore through reinforced materials like paper. Teeth crushed metal supports into twisted wreckage. For 30 seconds, the creature was pure destruction, a reminder of why its species was feared throughout the galaxy. Then Nari spoke a single word in Korean. "Enough!" Grimjaw froze instantly, its claws inches from delivering another devastating blow. The sudden stillness was more impressive than the violence had been. Raw fury transformed into perfect calm in the space between heartbeats. The arena fell completely silent. In the viewing boxes, beings who had witnessed 1,000 battles struggled to process what they had just seen. Perfect aggression followed by perfect control. Devastating violence transformed into gentle submission by nothing more than a quiet word from a small human woman. Grimjaw turned away from the destroyed targets and walked calmly to Nari's side. Then, to the amazement of everyone present, the massive predator that had just demonstrated its deadly capabilities lowered its great head and nuzzled against her hand like an enormous, deadly house cat. The trial was over. The impossible had been achieved. And the galaxy would never look at humans or the concept of taming in quite the same way again. The silence in the arena stretched for long moments as thousands of beings tried to understand what they had witnessed. Then, slowly, applause began. It started with a single pair of hands clapping in one of the viewing boxes and spread like wildfire until the entire complex thundered with approval. Nari stood quietly beside Grimjaw, one hand resting on the massive creature's head while he pressed against her side like a contented pet. She felt overwhelmed by the noise and attention, but Grimjaw's steady presence kept her calm. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced Corvin, his voice shaking with emotion. "For the first time in the recorded history of the dominance trials, we have witnessed complete and successful taming of a Kalos Prime predator. Kim Nari of the human research vessel Harmony has achieved the impossible." The crowd erupted again, even louder than before. In the betting pools, fortunes changed hands, as those few who had believed in Nari collected their winnings. But most spectators seemed to have forgotten about money entirely. They were witnessing history being made. In his private box, Thekmor watched the celebration with mixed feelings. His financial ruin was now complete. The creature he had counted on to remain savage had instead become the galaxy's most famous example of interspecies friendship. Yet as he looked at Grimjaw's obvious happiness, he found he could not regret what had happened. "Remarkable," said Vexhai, settling into the chair beside him. "I have transferred the money for your debts. Consider it a gift." Thekmor stared at his former business partner in confusion. "Why? You lost as much as I did when the trials ended this way." "Actually, I won considerably more. I placed a very large bet on the human woman succeeding, using a false identity and an untraceable account." "You bet against me? Against your own plan?" Vexhai's multiple eyes gleamed with amusement. "I have been watching interspecies relations for longer than you have been alive, my friend. When I saw that small human woman treat a dangerous predator with genuine kindness, I knew something unprecedented was happening. Humans have a capacity for empathy that other species struggle to understand." Down in the arena, Park Ji-han and Dr. Yoon Sora rushed to congratulate their colleague. The xenobiologist's recording equipment had captured every moment of the trials, and he knew the data would revolutionize how different species interacted throughout the galaxy. "The implications are enormous," he said excitedly. "If humans can form this kind of bond with creatures from Kalos Prime, what other species might benefit from similar approaches? We could be looking at the end of traditional animal training methods." Lee Dong-soo approached Nari with obvious respect. The fight coordinator had managed brutal competitions for 20 years, but he had never seen anything like what had just occurred. "Miss Kim," he said formally, "the station administration has authorized me to offer you any prize you wish. Money, property, transport to any world you choose. Name your reward." Nari looked down at Grimjaw, who was still pressed against her side. "I want him to be free," she said simply. "No more cages, no more fights, no more being treated like a weapon. That is hardly a reward. The creature is yours by right of conquest. You can do whatever you wish with it. Then I wish for him to choose his own path, to go where he wants and live as he chooses. Dongsu frowned. But where would such a creature go? Grimjaw has been in captivity for 12 years. It knows nothing of life outside these walls. He knows me, Nari said. And I know him. If he chooses to stay with me, we will travel together. If he chooses to return to his homeworld, I will help him find his way. The choice will be his. Word of Nari's decision spread quickly through the station. Within hours, news networks across the galaxy were reporting the story of the human woman who had not only tamed the untamable beast, but had then given it the freedom to choose its own destiny. 3 days later, Nari and Grimjaw stood together in the docking bay of the research vessel Harmony. The ship had been modified with a special compartment designed for the massive creature's comfort, complete with proper lighting, temperature control, and space to move freely. Captain Bei Hyun-woo, the vessel's commanding officer, watched nervously as Grimjaw explored his new quarters. "Are you certain this is safe?" he asked Nari. "The crew is trained for scientific research, not managing dangerous predators." "Grimjaw is not dangerous unless something threatens those he cares about," Nari replied. "And he cares about me, which means he cares about this crew by extension." As if to prove her point, Grimjaw approached Dr. Kim Taemin, the ship's senior researcher. The elderly scientist stood perfectly still as the massive creature sniffed curiously at him, then gently nuzzled his shoulder in greeting. "Extraordinary," Taemin whispered. "It is treating me as a member of your pack." Over the following weeks, as the Harmony traveled between star systems, Grimjaw proved to be an ideal traveling companion. He helped with cargo loading using his strength, served as an early warning system with his acute senses, and provided companionship during the long stretches between worlds. But more importantly, his presence opened doors that had been closed to human researchers for generations. Alien species that had been suspicious of human motives found themselves fascinated by the relationship between Nari and Grimjaw. If humans could form such bonds with creatures from the deadly world of Kalos Prime, what other bridges might be possible? The research team's next assignment took them to Zentros VII, where they had been invited to study the planet's unique ecosystem. The Zenthari government had specifically requested that Nari and Grimjaw be part of the mission, hoping to learn from their partnership. As the Harmony approached the planet, Nari stood in the observation deck with Grimjaw beside her. The creature had grown even larger and healthier during their travels, and his scales now gleamed with perfect condition. "What do you think?" she asked him, gesturing toward the blue-green world below. "Ready for another adventure?" Grimjaw made his familiar rumbling sound of contentment and pressed his massive head against her shoulder. In the months since leaving Korvac Station, he had learned to understand much more human speech, though he still preferred to communicate through touch and sound. "The Zenthari delegation is very excited to meet you both," said Captain Hyunwoo, joining them at the viewing window. "They have requested a full presentation on human bonding techniques with aggressive species." "We are not aggressive species," Nari corrected gently. "We are family now." The word carried throughout the ship's communication system and was picked up by monitoring stations on a dozen nearby worlds. Family. A human woman had called a creature from the most dangerous planet in known space her family, and the galaxy had listened. Within a year, the techniques Nari had developed were being taught at universities and research centers throughout human space. Scientists from other species came to study with her, learning that dominance and control were not the only ways to work with dangerous creatures. The Harmony became known as the Friendship Ship, carrying its unusual crew to worlds where conflict had seemed inevitable. Time and again, Nari and Grimjaw demonstrated that understanding and compassion could succeed where force had failed. Thegmore, his debts paid and his honor restored through honest work as a transport coordinator, often told the story of the human woman who had cost him everything and given him something far more valuable in return. The knowledge that some things in the universe were more important than profit or pride. On distant Kalos Prime, other members of Grimjaw's species began to show less aggression toward visiting researchers, as if somehow, across the vast distances of space, they sensed that one of their own had found peace among the stars. And in the depths of space aboard the research vessel Harmony, a small human woman and a massive predator sat together in comfortable silence, watching new worlds pass by their windows. They had proven that friendship could cross any barrier, bridge any difference, and transform the most unlikely beings into family. The galaxy was learning that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their courage, but their unlimited capacity to see the potential for good in any living being. Even in creatures that others had written off as monsters, the untamable had been tamed, not through force or fear, but through the simple revolutionary act of treating another being with kindness and respect. And the universe would never be quite the same.